This is NDTV. And you're watching NDTV Prime. In association with Micromax. Nothing like anything.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us for this very special discussion on financing Indian Railways. Now, what an amazing transport system Indian Railways is. The figures are absolutely staggering. 23 million passengers are ferried every day. And just to put it in a little bit of perspective, that's twice the population of Australia. Not only is it amazing in terms of figures, but it's also the most environment-friendly transport system. And for this country to actually meet the Kyoto Protocol, we have to just ensure that Indian Railways is modernized and of course becomes world class. All of us, everybody sitting in the audience here has a wonderful, lovely story of their journey on an Indian train. But we do know that Indian Railways is overburdened, creaking, needs to be modernized, it needs money. And today with this panel, including the Honorable Minister who's with us, we do need to find routes to modernize, finance Indian Railways and make it world class. Let me introduce my panel to you. Mr. Manoj Sinha, Minister of State, Ministry of Railways. Gentlemen, a big hand for the Minister for being here with us. And of course, his vision, his government's new vision for Indian Railways is going to be extremely critical. Also with me, Mr. Rajiv Datt, Managing Director, IRFC, that's Indian Railway Finance Corporation. Mr. Rakesh Saksena, CMD Mumbai Rail Vikas Corporation. Mr. S.P. Nayar, CMD of IIFCL. Mr. Shin Oya, Chief Representative of JBIC. Mr. Alistair, Hitachi Rail Global CEO. And I'm Manisha, Natarajan. I actually look after real estate and personal finance. First, over to you, Mr. Sinha. आप अपना विजन हमें बताइए क्या है अब इतनी उम्मीदें हैं हम सबको मिस्टर प्रभु से आपसे कि आप का जो विजन है मॉडर्नाइज करने का वो सबसे बेहतर होगा
रेल यातायात का सबसे सस्ता उपयुक्त और प्रकृति के हिसाब से भी तालमेल बैठाने वाला साधन है। पिछले कुछ दिनों में रेलवे की कठिनाई ये हुई है कि हमने अनेक परियोजनाएं स्वीकृत कर दी और उनके क्रियान्वयन के लिए हमारे पास धन की कमी हो गई। एक बड़ी कठिनाई है। हमारा पूरा नेटवर्क पुराना है, उसको शीघ्रातिशीघ्र मॉडर्नाइज करने की ज़रूरत है और जो अपेक्षाएं हैं यात्रियों की और ख़ास तौर से मालवाहकों की, माने फ्रेट ट्रैफिक की, तो उस जिस अनुपात में वो वृद्धि हुई है फ्रेट ट्रैफिक में, उस अनुपात में हम अपना इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर नहीं बढ़ा सके। अगर आप देखें तो फ्रेट ट्रैफिक 10 गुना बढ़ गया है और हमारा नेटवर्क लगभग 2 गुना के आसपास हम बढ़ा सकें। तो इस गैप को भरने के लिए भारी संसाधनों की ज़रूरत है और उसके लिए हमारी सरकार ने कुछ ठोस उपाय प्रारंभ किए। तो एक तो साहसिक कदम प्रधानमंत्री जी या सरकार ने उठाया कि इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का जो हमारा क्षेत्र है और भी जो क्षेत्र हैं रेलवे के, उनमें 100% FDI अलाउ कर दिया। प्राइवेट पार्टिसिपेशन के लिए भी हमने 5 ऐसे मॉडल तय किए हैं जिनमें लोग अधिक से अधिक पूंजी निवेश कर सकते हैं।
All right, so I think the minister has said everything that anybody looking at railway business, any private participant would want to hear. All right, so I'm going to go to Mr. Datt and ask him about his own understanding of looking at Indian Railways, the infrastructure upgrade requirement and what has happened so far in terms of financing, how far or how big is the gap of what monies have come in and what railways really need.
Thank you, Manisha. The World Bank had recently done a study about the infrastructure gap. The infrastructure gap is where the country should be to achieve, let us say, East Asian standards and where we are today. South Asian region in the next 6 years alone requires $2.5 trillion to reach the level of where the East Asian countries are today. Of this, transport alone would require $500 billion and 80% of this requirement would be in India. How much have we invested in the last 3 years? 1,60,000 crores. So even to maintain the present network, we are grossly underinvested.
All right. I think there is a gentleman amidst us who has figured out a way to get the monies together, get a central and a state government to work together, which, ladies and gentlemen, in this country is a huge nightmare. So I'm going to ask you, Mr. Saksena, run us through some of those experiences and tell us what worked.
Yeah. Today, if you look at Mumbai, the city on a 379-kilometer network carries 7.6 million passengers a day. And I can tell you is that with the state partnership, the state is the obvious beneficiary, the commuter is the beneficiary, and the sustainable network that is being provided by the Indian Railways is unmatched and requires substantial investment. It's a 50-50 partnership between the state and the center. And let me tell you, is that today we are spending approximately about 750 crores in capacity creation. But the supply-demand gap is too large. We require investments to be taken to a level of approximately 2,000 crores per annum. Funding is not the issue. The issue is going to be putting the right policies in place, getting the governments to work on a consensus, not as us versus them. And I can say that the present dispensation is very positive.
Okay, 2,000 crores needed every year, but the monies coming in or trickling in are very little. There was a time when, 15% of the planned investments of the government used to go. Budgetary allocations itself used to take care of the railways. But now that number is dropped to less than 3%. There is need for private money to come in. There is need for FDI, and that's the reason why FDI has been opened up. What, in your experience, will actually make a PPP model work for Indian Railways?
In many PPP cases, what happens is, I think the concessionaire or the government body looks at the private player as a contractor still. And the private player looks at, maximizing only the profits, sharing the profits, but not willingness to share the risk. So in the end, what happens is the profits become privatized and the losses become nationalized. And many times, the concession, people who have devised the concession agreement hold on to the concession agreement despite the flaws there, not willing to change it. I think we need to be slightly more flexible in the way we draft it, and we have to be a lot more careful in the way we draft it. What I find is that, so far the infrastructure financing has been done mostly by banks. The way things are going with the Basel III coming in, banks will find it difficult from their exposure point of view, from their limited capital, and also from the rating point of view. They will not be able to take exposure to unrated projects in future because the capital is very scarce and capital is very costly. The debt funding, therefore, is very important because, although you invite FDI, you invite other capital, most of the people who want to invest in equity will also want a high amount of debt to make the equity investment profitable. Right. Without sufficient debt, the equity will not come. Because railway projects essentially require very long-term debt, and if you don't have the hedging facility for very long term. And that such hedging, even if it's available, make it very costly than the rupee funding. So therefore, we need to evolve a domestic long-term funding mechanisms here very urgently. Railway projects will require a much longer concession period because the cash flow will be different from normally, let us say a road project or any other short-term project. If you see, the projects are normally 40-50 year concessions. Right. So we need to find out a way how to finance this.
I'd like your experience. I mean, there must be some excitement of 100% FDI in Indian Railways. Give us your experience of international, global workings of your bank, and then in India, what are the opportunities that you see?
We hope that this kind of PPP initiative succeed. This is quite important, I think. For PPP, generally, my experience is that it's not so easy. All parties agree with what PPP is, try to achieve kind of things. If some country try to do PPP in one sector, and if there is some target number, for example, by PPP doing this kilometer of rail, or by PPP this kind of investment is expected, first try, if investment doesn't happen, maybe government sector takes more risk, probably. If more money is coming, in that case, maybe government sector can reduce government support kind of things. So such kind of practical approach is very important, I think. I'm talking about not only foreign investor, but also domestic investor. My feeling is that domestic investor is more important. So practical approach is very important.
Okay. Mr. Dauber? Does a company like you have the appetite for Indian Railways?
Yeah, very much so. There's been a lot of debate in terms of who is best placed to do what. I live in the United Kingdom, and 20 years ago, the railways was seen as a declining system. It needed huge investment. Now, there have been several different attempts at privatization, but ultimately where the railways are now is they're doubling the number of people that they're carrying with huge investment which has come from the private sector. And it follows a number of different ways. So Hitachi has supplied trains into the United Kingdom which are owned by leasing companies, and those trains are then leased to the operator and are used purely on an operational basis, and Hitachi provides all the maintenance services for those trains. Our most recent contract is a true PPP where we are taking the availability risk on the asset.
Okay.
So we're building the trains, we're investing in the depots, we're providing full maintenance for 27 years, and we provide so many trains per day to the operator which are clean, fully serviceable, and fully functioning. In that model, we don't take the ridership risk or the revenue risk because there are many other aspects that affect the revenue and the ridership. There are political considerations of pricing, of fares, there's the economic situation of the country. As GDP climbs, ridership on the railways climb. If GDP starts to reduce, then the ridership reduces, particularly in cities and commuting areas. We're very good at taking risks where we can manage it. But if the risk is unclear, and if the risk is really something that's more associated with government policy or associated with other approvals outside our control, then it's very difficult for us to take that risk and it pushes the price up.